Lock every exit. Right now. The command cut through the ballroom like a crack of thunder. Conversations stopped. Crystal glasses froze halfway to waiting lips. More than 300 guests turned toward billionaire William Harrington as security teams rushed across the marble floor. No one understood what was happening. No one except one waitress standing quietly near the back of the room. And the strangest part of all? The person who had uncovered the threat wasn't a security expert, an investigator, or one of William's highly paid consultants. It was Ava Brooks, just a waitress, or at least that was what everyone thought. 3 hours earlier, the Harrington Grand Hotel had looked like a scene from a movie. Golden chandeliers filled the ballroom with warm light. A string quartet played softly near the stage. Some of the most influential people in the country gathered beneath a ceiling 40 feet high to attend William Harrington's annual charity gala. The event attracted CEOs, investors, politicians, and celebrities. Millions of dollars would be pledged before the night ended. Ava moved quietly between tables carrying silver trays and sparkling water. At 28 years old, she had worked enough events to know that wealthy people often ignored those serving them. She didn't mind. Being overlooked had taught her something valuable. People revealed more when they thought nobody was paying attention. While guests focused on speeches and business deals, Ava watched faces, habits, movements, patterns. It was something she had done since childhood. Then she noticed the first man. He stood near a column, speaking to no one. Nothing unusual at first, except his watch. Ava glanced at it while placing drinks on a nearby table. The watch face displayed 8:17. She moved on. 10 minutes later, she noticed another guest near the auction display. Different suit, different age, different table. Yet his watch also showed 8:17. Ava slowed slightly. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe both watches had stopped. But something felt wrong. Another 20 minutes passed. Then she saw a third watch. Again, 8:17. Her fingers tightened around the tray. The ballroom suddenly felt different, larger, quieter, more uncertain. She carefully studied the three men. They never spoke to each other, never stood together. Yet each seemed strangely aware of where the others were. Ava felt a chill crawl down her spine. Somewhere in this room, hidden beneath the music and polite smiles, a pattern was forming, and she was beginning to realize she might be the only person who could see it. Ava tried to convince herself she was overthinking it. After all, people forgot to set watches. Batteries died. Strange coincidences happened every day. Yet as she moved through the ballroom, collecting empty glasses and refilling sparkling water, the uneasy feeling refused to leave. The fourth watch appeared less than 15 minutes later. This time it belonged to a man standing near the center of the room, laughing at something a guest had said. He looked completely relaxed, perfectly normal, but when he raised his hand to adjust his cuff, Ava saw it. 8:17. Again, her pulse quickened. For different people, for different watches, the exact same time. She glanced around the ballroom. Nobody else seemed to notice. The quartet continued playing. Servers moved between tables. Guests discussed investments, politics, and luxury vacations. The room felt calm, elegant, safe. Yet Ava could not shake the feeling that she was staring at a puzzle whose pieces were hiding in plain sight. She began paying closer attention. Not to the watches anymore, to the people wearing them. The first man drifted toward the east side of the ballroom. 10 minutes later, the second man casually crossed the room and stopped near a display of auction items. The third remained near the stage. The fourth moved toward the bar. None of them interacted directly. None even looked at one another for more than a second. But somehow they seemed connected, like actors following a script only they could see. Ava noticed something else. Every few minutes, one of them would glance toward a hallway leading deeper into the hotel. Not long enough to attract attention. Just a quick look. Then another. Then another. The hallway led to several private conference suites reserved for William Harrington and his executive team. A cold knot formed in Ava's stomach. She set down a tray and quietly approached one of the security officers positioned near the ballroom entrance. His name tag read Daniel. He stood nearly 6 feet 3 inches tall, wearing a dark suit and an earpiece. Ava lowered her voice. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel barely looked at her. "Make it quick." Ava explained what she had seen. The matching watches, the unusual movements, the repeated glances toward the hallway. Daniel listened for a few seconds before exhaling. "You are worried about watches?" Ava hesitated. Hearing it out loud suddenly sounded ridiculous. "It is not just the watches." Daniel smiled politely, the kind of smile people used when dismissing a child's concern. "Everyone here has been screened. Every guest checked in through multiple security layers. We have this under control." "But what if—" "Miss Brooks," he interrupted gently, "focus on your tables. Let us handle security." Then he turned away. Conversation over. Ava stood there for a moment. Embarrassment warmed her cheeks. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was seeing patterns where none existed. Yet as she returned to the ballroom, something caught her eye. One of the men with the stopped watch had just spilled a drink on his jacket. It looked accidental, harmless. Guests stepped aside while he apologized and headed toward the restroom corridor. But at that exact moment, another man with a matching watch quietly stood up from his table and walked in the opposite direction. Ava stopped walking. Her instincts sharpened. The pattern was changing. And whatever it meant, it was happening now. Ava remained still, pretending to adjust a tray of empty glasses while her eyes followed the movement unfolding across the ballroom. The man who had spilled the drink disappeared into the restroom corridor. At almost the same moment, another man with a watch frozen at 8:17 left his table and drifted toward the hallway leading to the private conference suites. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet the timing felt deliberate. Ava glanced toward the stage where William Harrington was speaking with several investors. The billionaire looked relaxed, confident, completely unaware that anything unusual might be happening around him. The guests laughed. Cameras flashed. Waiters carried champagne. Everything appeared normal. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Ava quietly moved toward the hallway. She kept a professional smile on her face, greeting guests as she passed. The farther she walked from the ballroom, the quieter the hotel became. The music faded behind her. The sound of conversations softened. Ahead stretched a polished corridor lined with framed photographs and closed doors. Then she saw something that made her stop. One of the men with the stopped watch had paused near a decorative table. He was not using his phone. He was not checking directions. He simply stood there for a few seconds, studying a brass plaque mounted beside a door farther down the hall. Then he continued walking. Ava followed at a distance. Her heart beat faster. The plaque caught her attention immediately. Room 817. She stared at the numbers. 817. Suddenly the watches flashed through her mind. For different watches. The exact same display. 817. A chill swept through her. It was never a time. It was a room number. Ava looked back toward the ballroom entrance. Security officers remained stationed at their posts, calm and unconcerned. They were searching for suspicious behavior. They were checking credentials, watching cameras, monitoring guests, but nobody was looking for patterns. Nobody was connecting the pieces. She looked again toward room 817. According to hotel staff schedules, the suite was reserved exclusively for William Harrington's executive team during the gala. Confidential documents connected to an upcoming multi-billion-dollar agreement were being reviewed there throughout the evening. Ava suddenly understood why the men never spoke to one another, why they remained separated, why they kept checking the hallway. Her stomach tightened. She turned immediately and hurried back toward the ballroom. The music grew louder with every step. Guests continued enjoying the event, unaware that something important might be unfolding only yards away. Ava spotted Daniel near the entrance and approached him again. This time there was no hesitation in her voice. "You need to listen to me," she said. Daniel frowned. "What is it now?" Ava took a breath. 817 is not the time on those watches. She pointed toward the hallway. It is room 817. And I think those men are working together. For the first time that evening, Daniel's expression changed. The confidence disappeared. Only slightly, but enough for Ava to notice. Because somewhere deep inside, he was beginning to realize she might be right. Daniel stared at Ava for several seconds. The noise of the ballroom seemed distant now. Guests continued laughing and networking only a few yards away, completely unaware of the tension building near the entrance. Room 817? He repeated. Ava nodded. Think about it. For different people. For watches showing the same numbers. They never speak to each other, but they keep watching the hallway. It cannot be a coincidence. Daniel glanced toward the corridor. For the first time all evening, uncertainty crossed his face. He touched the earpiece hidden beneath his collar and quietly spoke into it. Within moments, another security supervisor approached. Ava quickly explained everything again. This time nobody smiled. Nobody dismissed her. The supervisor listened carefully, then looked toward room 817. Stay here, he said. The two men immediately walked away. Ava watched them disappear into the hallway. Her pulse continued racing. Part of her wanted to believe she had misunderstood everything. Maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe the watches were nothing more than an unusual coincidence after all. But deep down, she knew the feeling that had guided her attention all evening. The same instinct that noticed details others overlooked. 20 minutes passed. Then 25. Ava returned to serving tables, though she could barely focus on her work. Every few minutes she glanced toward the hallway. Security personnel now moved more frequently between locations. Their expressions had changed. They no longer looked relaxed. Something was happening. Near the stage, William Harrington continued greeting guests and discussing business opportunities. His calm confidence never wavered. He looked like a man fully in control of the evening. The irony was almost painful. The person at the center of everything seemed to know the least about what was unfolding around him. Then Ava noticed another shift. One of the men with the stopped watches suddenly left the ballroom. A minute later, another followed. Neither appeared alarmed. Neither hurried. Yet both departed within moments of each other. Ava quietly moved toward a service station near the entrance. From there, she could see the hallway and part of the ballroom at the same time. A security officer she had never seen before hurried past carrying a tablet. Two others followed. Their pace was controlled but urgent. Ava's stomach tightened. The pieces were moving faster now. Whatever the watches meant, security had finally recognized it was important. A few moments later, Daniel returned. His face looked completely different from before. Gone was the polite confidence. Gone was the dismissive smile. He stopped beside Ava and lowered his voice. How did you notice it? Ava blinked. Notice what? Daniel looked toward room 817 before answering. You were right. We found something that should not have been there. Ava felt the air leave her lungs. Daniel shook his head slowly, still trying to process it himself. And now we need to inform William Harrington immediately. Daniel led Ava through a side corridor normally reserved for hotel staff and security personnel. The farther they walked from the ballroom, the quieter the building became. The distant music faded into a faint hum. Bright marble floors gave way to private executive hallways lined with dark wood panels and soft lighting. Ava had worked at the Harrington Grand for nearly 3 years, yet she had never been allowed beyond this point. Tonight, nobody stopped her. Nobody questioned why a waitress was walking beside senior security officers. Ahead, 2 supervisors stood outside room 817. Their expressions were tense. One held a tablet while another spoke quietly into a radio. As Ava approached, the conversation stopped. Several pairs of eyes turned toward her. Not with annoyance. Not with dismissal. With curiosity. Daniel gestured toward Ava. She is the one who connected the watches. The supervisors exchanged a glance. One of them shook his head slowly. We reviewed hours of camera footage and guest logs. We checked credentials. We monitored entrances. Yet nobody caught it. Ava felt uncomfortable under the attention. She looked toward the closed conference room door. What exactly did you find? The supervisor hesitated before answering. Something that should not have been inside this room. He chose his words carefully. A device capable of accessing confidential digital information. Ava stared at him. The implications settled heavily in the silence. Room 817 was where executives had been reviewing documents tied to William Harrington's upcoming agreement. An agreement rumored to be worth billions of dollars. The supervisor continued. It was hidden well, very well. If nobody had noticed the pattern, it might have remained undiscovered until after the event. Ava looked down briefly. She did not feel triumphant. She felt relieved. The uneasy feeling that had followed her throughout the evening finally made sense. Suddenly footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Several executives appeared, moving quickly toward the room. At their center was William Harrington himself. The billionaire's calm expression had vanished. His sharp blue eyes moved immediately from the security team to the conference room door. "Tell me everything," he said. Nobody wasted time. The supervisor explained what had been discovered and how the investigation had started. William listened without interrupting. Then he asked a single question. Who noticed it first? The hallway grew quiet. Daniel looked toward Ava. So did everyone else. William followed their gaze. For a moment, confusion crossed his face. He looked at Ava's black server uniform, the silver tray still tucked beneath one arm, and the simple name tag pinned near her shoulder. Her? He asked quietly. Daniel nodded. Ava Brooks. William studied her carefully, not dismissively, not skeptically, simply trying to understand. You saw something my entire security division missed? Ava swallowed. I did not see more than they did. William raised an eyebrow. Ava looked toward the conference room door before answering. I just paid attention to what did not fit. For the first time that evening, the billionaire said nothing. He simply looked at her, and somewhere behind his eyes, respect had already begun to replace surprise. Ava expected the conversation to end there. She expected William Harrington to thank her politely, return to his executives, and allow the security team to handle the rest. Instead, the billionaire remained standing in the hallway, studying her with the same focus she had seen him give investors and business partners throughout the evening. The corridor had grown unusually quiet. Security personnel moved carefully between rooms. Radios crackled softly. Executives waited nearby, exchanging concerned glances. Yet William's attention remained on the waitress who had noticed what nobody else had. How long have you worked here? He finally asked. Ava seemed surprised by the question. Almost 3 years. William nodded slowly. And before that? Ava hesitated. Different jobs. A faint smile touched William's face. That is not really an answer. Ava lowered her eyes briefly. No, sir. I suppose it is not. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then one of the security supervisors approached carrying a tablet. His expression was serious. We reviewed additional footage, he said. There is more. William immediately turned toward him. The supervisor displayed several security images. Ava could not see the screen clearly, but she noticed the change in everyone's expressions. The room became even quieter. Several executives exchanged worried looks. William's jaw tightened. How many? He asked. For confirmed individuals, the supervisor replied. Possibly more connections. We are still verifying. Ava recognized the number immediately. For watches, for people, for pieces of the pattern. William exhaled slowly and looked down the corridor toward the ballroom. Hundreds of guests continued enjoying the gala. Donors pledged money. Cameras captured smiling photographs. The event appeared flawless. Yet behind the scenes, an entirely different story was unfolding. Have local authorities been notified? William asked. Yes, the supervisor answered. They are already on the way. William nodded. Then he surprised everyone. He looked directly at Ava. Walk me through exactly what you saw. Several executives seemed confused. One even glanced at another as if questioning why a waitress was suddenly being consulted during a high-level security investigation. Ava noticed the reaction but ignored it. She carefully explained everything from the beginning. The first watch, the second, the unusual movements, the repeated attention toward the hallway, the timing, the pattern. As she spoke, William listened without interrupting. Not once. He treated every observation as important, every detail as valuable. When she finished, silence settled over the group. Finally, one executive shook his head. Our analysts review data all day. Our consultants search for trends professionally. Yet she saw it while carrying drink trays. William looked toward Ava again. This time there was something different in his expression. Not curiosity, not surprise, respect, genuine respect. Then a voice suddenly crackled through a nearby radio. The message was brief, but it changed everything. The supervisor listened carefully. His eyes widened. He turned toward William. "Sir," he said quietly, "you need to hear this immediately." The supervisor stepped closer and lowered his voice, but the tension in the hallway made every word feel heavier. "We finished tracing the movements of the 4 individuals," he said. "They were not acting independently." Nobody spoke. William held the supervisor's gaze. "Go on." The supervisor glanced at the tablet before continuing. "They entered the hotel separately, arrived at different times, used different registration paths. But camera footage confirms repeated coordination throughout the evening." A silence settled over the corridor. Ava felt a chill despite the warm lighting around them. The pattern she had sensed was now becoming fact. The supervisor continued. "We also discovered something else." He tapped the screen. Several temporary guest credentials used tonight were linked through the same outside contact. One executive quietly muttered, "That cannot be a coincidence." "It is not," the supervisor replied. William's expression hardened. He was not angry. He was focused. The way successful people became when every distraction disappeared and only the problem remained. "How close did they get?" he asked. The supervisor hesitated. "Closer than we would like." Nobody needed further explanation. The answer alone was enough. Ava looked down the hallway toward room 817. Earlier that evening it had been just another conference suite. Now it felt like the center of an invisible storm. William remained silent for several moments. Then he looked toward Ava again. "When did you first realize something was wrong?" Ava thought about it carefully. "Not when I saw the watches." William listened. "Not when they avoided each other either." "Then when?" Ava looked toward the ballroom entrance where distant music still drifted through the corridor. "When I realized they were all pretending not to notice each other." Several people exchanged glances. Ava continued. "Most strangers accidentally look at one another. They react to movement. They acknowledge people nearby without thinking. These men never did. Felt practiced." The supervisor slowly nodded. "That matches what we found in the footage." Another executive looked genuinely amazed. "You noticed all of that while working?" Ava gave a small shrug. "People tell you a lot when they think you are invisible." The words lingered in the air. William seemed to reflect on them longer than anyone else. Then another security officer hurried down the corridor carrying fresh information. He stopped beside the supervisor and whispered something into his ear. The supervisor's eyes widened. William immediately noticed. "What is it?" The officer handed over a report. "We identified the room that appears to have been the intended focus of the operation." William looked down at the document. His expression changed instantly. Not fear, not panic, recognition. "That room was scheduled to receive the final merger documents tonight," one executive said quietly. Another executive exhaled sharply. "If those documents had been compromised." He never finished the sentence. He did not need to. Everyone understood the consequences. William slowly folded the report and looked around the corridor. Then he made a decision. "Lock every exit," he said calmly. "Nobody leaves until we finish this." The hallway fell completely silent. Security teams moved immediately. Radios crackled to life. Footsteps echoed in every direction. And standing quietly among executives, investigators, and security professionals, Ava Brooks suddenly realized that the pattern she noticed while carrying a simple serving tray had just changed the entire night. Within minutes, the atmosphere inside the Harrington Grand changed completely. Guests did not panic. Most did not even realize what was happening. They simply noticed security officers appearing in greater numbers near exits, elevators, and private corridors. The music continued. Conversations continued. Yet beneath the polished surface of the gala, an invisible investigation was unfolding. Ava remained near the executive hallway while security teams coordinated their response. She felt strangely out of place among billion-dollar executives and senior investigators. Her black server uniform suddenly seemed very small compared to the importance of the people surrounding her. Yet nobody was asking her to leave. In fact, several officers now approached her directly with questions. They wanted timelines, locations, descriptions, details she had noticed throughout the evening. Ava answered carefully. Every observation mattered. Every memory became another piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, authorities arrived and began reviewing evidence collected from room 817. The hidden device discovered earlier was removed for examination. Initial findings confirmed what security had feared. The device had been positioned specifically to access confidential business information. News of the discovery spread quietly among William's inner circle. Faces grew serious. Voices became lower. One executive shook his head repeatedly as if struggling to believe how close they had come to a disaster that nobody had seen coming. Nobody except a waitress carrying drink trays. William stood near a conference table reviewing updates as they arrived. For nearly an hour he spoke with security directors, legal advisors, and investigators. Yet every so often his eyes drifted toward Ava. Not because she demanded attention. She did not. She continued helping wherever she could, answering questions and assisting staff. But William kept returning to the same thought. Hundreds of highly trained professionals had been present that evening. Millions of dollars had been invested in security systems. Cameras watched every hallway. Software monitored every access point. Yet the breakthrough had come from someone nobody considered part of the security operation at all. Eventually Daniel approached William carrying a final report. "We completed the review," he said. William looked up. "And?" Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Her timeline was accurate. Every major development started with the pattern she identified. William glanced toward Ava again. Across the room she was helping another server organize trays for guests. Calm, quiet, unaware that several executives were now discussing her observations as if they were evidence presented by a professional investigator. One executive finally laughed softly in disbelief. "All night we watched for suspicious actions." William nodded slowly. "And she watched for meaning." The distinction hung in the air. Simple, powerful, true. As the evening moved toward its conclusion, the crisis that had threatened the event was finally under control. But something else had changed as well. The way people looked at Ava Brooks. The waitress who entered the night invisible had become the person nobody could stop talking about. By the time the gala began winding down, the atmosphere inside the Harrington Grand felt different. The chandeliers still glowed. The quartet still played. Guests still smiled for photographs. Yet beneath the elegance, everyone who knew the truth understood how close the evening had come to ending very differently. Ava returned to her duties without asking for recognition. She collected empty glasses, straightened table settings, helped other servers prepare dessert trays. If anyone had walked into the ballroom at that moment, they would have seen nothing more than a hardworking waitress finishing a long shift. That was exactly how Ava preferred it. Near the main stage, William Harrington watched her from across the room. Several executives continued discussing reports and security findings, but his attention drifted elsewhere. He kept thinking about a simple question. How many times had he walked past people like Ava without truly seeing them? How many brilliant observations had been overlooked because they came from someone wearing a uniform instead of a business suit? As the final guests gathered for closing remarks, William made an unexpected decision. He stepped onto the stage and accepted the microphone. The room gradually fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward him. "Before tonight ends," William said, "there is someone I would like to recognize." Ava froze when she heard her name. Every head in the ballroom turned toward her. She immediately wished they had not. William smiled and motioned for her to come forward. Reluctantly, she approached the stage. The room filled with curious whispers. Most guests had no idea why a waitress was suddenly standing beside one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. William waited for the room to settle. Then he spoke. "Tonight, our security systems worked. Our teams worked. Our advisors worked. But one person noticed something all of us missed." Silence filled the ballroom. Ava Brooks paid attention when nobody else did. Ava looked down, uncomfortable with the attention. William continued. "She reminded me that expertise is valuable. Experience is valuable. But observation is priceless." Several guests began applauding. Then more joined. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. Ava looked out across the crowd, stunned. William leaned slightly closer and said quietly enough that only she could hear, "You protected something important tonight." Ava smiled softly. "I just noticed a pattern." William nodded. "Exactly." As applause echoed through the ballroom, one truth became impossible to ignore. Security had watched the cameras. Executives had watched the numbers. Experts had watched the reports. But Ava Brooks had watched the people. And sometimes the quietest person in the room sees what everyone else misses.